quickly introduce myself. My name's Pat Ripley. I'm the Executive Director at the Lamoille Economic Development Corporation and the Lamoille Chamber of Commerce. LEDC is one of 12 regional development centers in the state. If you're not familiar with those, grab me sometime today and I'll tell you what we're all about. But generally speaking, we're a business advocacy group. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to our president, Greg Tatro. He's the owner of GW Tatro and the founder of Jenna's House in Johnson. And we'll get things started.
Morning, everyone. Thanks for coming. And I think we're going to find this kind of interesting this year. We have a few new members here, I see, and a few faces that I recognize. So one of the things we like to do is be respectful to our folks that are helping us with the state of Vermont. If we have questions, it's okay to have tough questions, but be kind of kind and civil. That's pretty handy. Pat was saying we're a business board, really. LEDC, it's a Lamoille Economic Development Corporation. So our interest is seeing Lamoille County be successful. And we want it to be a great place to live and a great place to work, and also a great place to take people that maybe aren't quite so lucky as the rest of us sitting here today. So, we're doing the best we can. We'd like to have outside ideas. If any of you folks have some good ideas that you think will help our county, send them over to Pat. We'll make sure everybody gets Pat's email. We want to keep him busy. So, I think that's a good thing. We have a pretty good board here. Not sure how many are here today, but Steve Clokey, he's marketing at Smugs. He was the past president. Stephanie Kruchar, HR director at Turtlefur. Eric Reamer's the director here at GMTC. He's been a great help by letting us use this and helping us get set up here. Jeremy Elliott, Smuggler's Notch Distillery. Mark Vandenberg, Sun and Ski Inn Suites. Tina Norton of the Union Bank. And Conrad Harris of MSI, who's here with us today. I think that's it for board members, isn't it, Pat, today? Yeah. So, we're going to have, I think, 3 more of these this year. Yep. Yeah. So, you're welcome to come. Bring your ideas out, but it's really about making Lamoille County a better place and competitive. Our neighbors, Chittenden County, seem to do quite well, and I don't know why we can't do better than they do. So thanks for coming.
Thanks, Greg. I did want to have one more person come up and speak really. Oh, well, maybe not. Okay, so I'll just point out Eric Remmers is the fellow over here in the red sweater. He runs this facility here, and Conrad, another board member here, and the table on the left with the grayish bluish shirt on. So if you're wondering who those folks are. So we'll go ahead, as Greg mentioned, we like to keep things civil here. We want our representatives to come back when we do this in February. Our event is February 6th. It's going to be at the Ackley Building in Stowe. Our March event is at Jenna's House in Johnson. And April will be at Smuggler's Notch up on the mountain in Cambridge. So we encourage you all to come. I understand we weren't able to get everybody in here who wanted to be in here today. The next 3 venues are bigger, so there will be more room. So bring your pals, and hopefully you all can come back and join us. So in the past, I've tried to introduce our representatives and their committees, and I've been unsuccessful when I try to do that because the committees change and whatnot. So I guess I'm going to ask the representatives to introduce themselves, and we'll just kind of start here and go work our way down, if you don't mind.
Sure. Good morning, everyone. I'm Kate Donnally. I serve alongside Dan Noyes representing Lamoille District 2, which is Hyde Park, Johnson, Wolcott, and Belvedere. I have served 2 years on the Judiciary Committee, and I hope to continue to serve in that committee. And I'm grateful to be here. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Kate.
Hi, I'm Lucy Boyden, representative-elect for Lamoille, District Lamoille 3, which is Cambridge and Waterville, and new, so no committee yet.
Good morning, Jed Lipsky, District 1, Lamoille, also known as Stowe. And I'm also, like my colleague Lucy, I'm a representative-elect, very excited to do this work and be part of this organization.
Good morning, I'm Avram Patt. I'm one of the two representatives for the Lamoille-Washington district. The other one, newly elected, who's not here, is Saudia Lamont. The district has been comprised of Morristown, Elmore, and in Washington County, Worcester and Woodbury. I live in Worcester. This time around, because of reapportionment, it also includes a portion of northern Stowe because, as I think people know, the numbers had changed enough that Stowe was too big to continue being a single-member district. So something had to happen, and I have this will be my fourth term. And I have served the last two terms on the Energy and Technology Committee. I'm waiting to see what the committee assignments are. I think there may be a little bit of adjustments in what some of the committees do. I've been on the Energy and Technology Committee because of my background in two different jobs in energy, although I have other interests. So I always tell the people making these choices that I also would not mind being on some other committee.
Good morning, I'm Dan Noyes. I live in Wolcott. I represent Wolcott, Hyde Park, Johnson, and Belvedere with Kate Donnally. And I've served for 3 terms on the Human Services Committee.
Good morning, I'm Representative Mark Higley. I'm from Lowell. I represent the Orleans-Lamoille district. For the past 10 years, it's included Lowell, J. Westfield, Troy, and Eden is my Lamoille County town. Through redistricting, it became a 2-seat district, so I now serve with Mike Marcotte, who's up in Coventry. So the district has increased and has included Coventry, Irisburg, and Newport town. I'm sure that Mike would like to be here. It's going to be difficult sometimes because our Orleans County Legislative Breakfasts are also on Mondays, so I've always tried to break it up and make sure that I can get down this way. But again, this will be my 15th year serving. I've been on government operations, ag and forestry, energy and technology, and who knows what committee I'll be on for the next couple of years. But thanks for being here.
Great, thanks everybody. So just a couple things I wanted to point out as we start this discussion. One interesting thing is, first off, the session starts tomorrow, so we haven't begun yet. So this is a great time to get out front of any issues that you may be interested in. The other two things are the redistricting that's occurred. So if you're not familiar with your representatives or which areas the representatives serve, this will hopefully be an opportunity to get more familiar with that. And the third thing just to acknowledge is the large turnover of representatives in the legislature this year. I'm not exactly sure how much it is. You all probably know better, but we at least,
in the House.
Yeah, Jed and Lucy are first term reps for Lamoille County. So we've got some fresh faces out there, and hopefully maybe that means some new ideas and some different approaches to some things that we've wrestled with in the past. So I'll stop there. And if anyone in the group has a question or a thought to run by our panel of reps here, I'd be happy to take that. Sometimes it's hard to get the ball rolling, but if anyone's willing to do that, we would welcome that. And if not, I have okay, Adam.
Where to begin? A couple, but I think one that probably has most impact would be childcare, affordable childcare. A couple of efforts have happened recently. It's a real big boulder to shoulder. So I wonder if you have any interest in exploring that or any defined detailed plans as to how to approach this.
Okay, so I'm just going to repeat that so the camera gets it, but the question is regarding childcare and plans to make that affordable. Is that correct? Any thoughts on that from the group? Anyone in particular? Feel free to pipe up. Jed?
Yeah, earlier asked what committees you're on, and I obviously did not respond because it hasn't been assigned, will be tomorrow. But early child care and education was one of the three interconnected challenges that I considered the most pressing for our community in Stowe, but all around the state and frankly the nation. That's housing, early child care education, and workforce. None of them stand as a unit, which is the sort of the sustainability of whether it's Stowe, Morrisville, Hyde Park, Johnson, any community, unless you have all three functioning. At this juncture, it's a crisis. So I was only endorsed by one organization, and that was Let's Grow Kids, because I have served on school boards for 10 years. I'm not a highly educated person. I know there are educators in this room. I'm very aware of how critical that is for our future and America's future. But with regard to child care, I deep dove into that. And when you talk about birth to 5, which is not covered in any of our system, if there is abuse, violence, alcoholism, drug addiction, trauma, poverty, any of these conditions that are not rare in our society, a young brain is very vulnerable to damage. I'm not here to preach about this, but so when they get to kindergarten, the challenge of our society to raise them is quadruply challenging. In Stowe, we have adequate and available child care, but it is not affordable. $15,000 to $20,000 or $10,000 to $15,000 or more per child. You have 2 or 3 kids, you'd like to be in the workforce. Most of us don't earn $40,000 a year, and you're not gonna spend 30 of that or half of it on child care. So there's no question. I've talked to business owners, big business owners, small business owners. This is a huge crisis for every business and every community in our district. And the legislature has moved forward. Now, it's the year where the rubber's gonna hit the road. There are a heck of a lot of other issues and initiatives, all with a price tag. So everyone at this table, we can advocate. We know this is a critical issue, but how are we gonna pay for it in a way that helps families, particularly those most vulnerable families, and doesn't chase people and employers out of the state? This is going to be very interesting, and God knows that I'm the least experienced in the legislature, so everyone at this table knows it's a critical issue, how we pay for it, whether it's an employer tax, an employee tax, a sliding scale based on percent of the income. There are a lot of ideas out there, because I've been following them, but I don't know that anyone has the real answer.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see. It does seem that that's going to be a major topic in the upcoming session. Any other thoughts from the group on this topic?
Sure, I'll go.
Yeah.
So we've worked on some childcare issues in the Human Services Committee over the past few years. We looked at our workforce and making sure that there's people coming in to be able to provide childcare, and also looking at the CCFAP, the Child Care Financial Assistance Program. Made some pretty substantial investments in that over the years, but there's still a lot of work to go. And I know that Representative Wood from Waterbury and Brumstead from Shelburne have been working on a bill. I haven't had a chance to really see the final draft yet, but that will kind of take it the next steps over what we've been talking about to make sure that, to hopefully help alleviate some of the costs associated with it, and make sure that there's a workforce that can be available to work. So.
Yeah, I'm happy to jump in. I have, this is a very personal issue for me. I have 2 young kids, 5 and 9. My family has to figure out how to pay over $1,000 a month for my daughter's childcare. We're counting down the days until public school starts next year in kindergarten. During the pandemic, we had to pay for childcare for a child that should have been in public school. And trying to afford childcare while trying to do this job has been an impossible financial bind for my family, I will say. So this is a very personal issue for me, as I know it is for others here. I think one of the things that is, first I'll say, I can't say enough about Let's Grow Kids. They've really laid out a track for us to follow, essentially, and I think we've been doing our best to honor all of the incredible work that they've done. I think one of the concerns I have that I'll just put out there, and ultimately would be curious to hear your perspectives as business owners, is I'm really concerned that over the coming 2 years it's going to be pitted against paid family leave. And I think really what we're talking about with paid family leave and childcare is essentially sort of the same discussion of how do we support one another, how do we support our families while maintaining an income that can allow us all to survive. And so I think it would be a real tragedy if those things were pitted against each other. But often the sense is that if we're going to be looking to employers to help foot the bill, that we can't lump these things together. I'd love to figure out creatively how to have both conversations and how to find the best way to support families regardless of whether they have young children or not. So I think we're going to need everyone's minds together to figure these things out and figure out where the money is going to come from.
Yeah. Is this question related to childcare? Okay, let me just make one comment then, and then we'll get to you, Emily. So I just want to communicate to the group we have here as the session's starting that the feedback we get from our business community is that we understand this is going to need to be paid for, likely by the business community. But what we're hearing is that the business community can support this, but not be the only funding source of this particular item, that they would really like to see some other folks step to the plate as well, which seems fair to me. Just wanted to communicate that. So yeah, Emily had a question.
Good morning. Emily Rosenbaum, Working Communities Challenge. Question for you. What do you guys, this is going to shock everybody that I want to ask about transportation. What do you guys see as the opportunities in this next session to advance transportation to employment, especially from places in our county that have opportunities for housing but lack transportation? Thanks.
So the question centered around what can be done about getting transportation to employment and improving that situation. And it seems that that's a barrier that we're encountering in the staffing/workforce discussion that's out there. Any thoughts on that from the group?
It's not that I'm mouthy, but I'm trying to compete with Emily over there. No. I can speak for Stowe that Green Mountain Transit has really, this year, particularly with Mountain Road, Route 108, from the south heading north, has really stepped up its game, and it's really helped in that transportation challenge. I've participated on committees with Emily, who's a fierce advocate for the rural outreaches of our region, and how critical transportation is. And it's not just to get to employment, to get to a grocery store. So rural transportation is very much related to whether it's to workforce and housing, and frankly to survival. So Emily, someone who's on the transportation committee may have some insight, but please.
I'm not on the transportation committee. However, back in the early 1980s, I spent a fair amount of time being a bus and van driver school bus in the most rural, smallest school district in the state at the time, Cabot. I drove kindergarten through high school all on the same bus. And I drove Meals on Wheels seniors and a whole bunch of other things, and ended up becoming the co-executive director of a fledgling nonprofit called Central Vermont Transportation Association that was developing public transit that didn't exist and had been formed by the executive directors of a number of nonprofit agencies, Community Action, Council on Aging, Mental Health, et cetera. The challenge, obviously, is in the area that organization served. You could have public transit services of one kind or another serving the greater Barre-Montpelier area. You get out into the boonies, that is the problem, whether it's employment, getting to healthcare services or shopping or whatever. There were a lot of experiments. Could we use school buses for public transportation and all of that? One of the things that has developed recently is, and it took me a while to get over this, is the bus route that I designed, the Hospital Hill shuttle connecting Barre and Montpelier with the hospital area in Berlin, was changed to be much more of a demand response Uber type thing. And I actually rode on that recently when I was in Montpelier waiting for my snow tires to get put on, which is another story. So there are attempts, but even with that, I think that will get, I'm just using that as an example, more riders that can use that, but in the same area. It's not going to get out to Worcester where I live. It's not going to get out to Woodbury. And in this area, it's not going to get out to the more rural parts of Lamoille County, including the rural parts of Morristown or Elmore. That is, I don't know the answer to that, because to run vehicles around picking up people maybe every 3, 4, 5 miles it just doesn't work.
Dan, yeah.
So I know your question was about workforce transportation, but the need for transportation for older Vermonters, especially in our rural communities, is definitely a lot more dire. And I think what a lot of it equates to is we don't have access to adequate housing for older Vermonters in our village centers, where we're able to run fixed route transportation on our main transportation corridors. So, something I've been working on and will continue to work on is looking at how we remove barriers to development of housing for older Vermonter in our village centers through either water, wastewater, auxiliary apartments. I think that is one way to deal with not only the transportation issue, but around housing, because it will open up housing. No one from, North Wolcott that has been living by themselves for years is going to move to senior housing in Stowe, where they don't have the social connections. They're going to try to stay in their home as long as possible. So, if we had adequate housing where they can keep where individuals can keep their social connections, that is on fixed route transportation in their communities, that may solve some of our problems, because it is, as Avram was saying, it is really hard to run this demand response where you're going way up onto East Hill or wherever to try to give someone a ride to the store. But if there was adequate housing on our transportation corridors, it might be a little bit easier.
Any other thoughts on transportation from the group? Okay. Question over here.
It's not necessarily relating to transporting people, but actually for all of us with the sort of decision for Vermont to follow California with the clean, with sort of electric vehicles. And I'm just concerned about the cost for the average person. And I thought it quite ironic that the governor was saying he loved his electric truck that was gifted to him, which is great. I think that's great to have such a gift, but many people don't have that. And so I'm just wondering what your thoughts are, because it's looming. It's what, 2035, it's coming.
Yeah, so it's a,
Those of us who have children who are actually going to have driver's licenses, like, to think of buying them a car, even a regular used car, and all of a sudden it might need to be an electric car.
yeah. So good question. The clean energy standard, I think she seems to be alluding to your thoughts on that and where we're going with that process. Any strong feelings from the group? Mark? Yeah.
I couldn't really hear the question. I heard a little bit about electric vehicles. I currently serve on the Rules, LCAR, Legislative Committee on Administrative Rules, where the Agency of Natural Resources just came forward with following the California Clean Car Standards. I have a real problem with that. I was one of two on the committee that voted no on the rules that they came up with to follow California, and would hope that they would go back to just the federal standards. There's so much wrong with that concept from a rural perspective, if you ask me. I mean, you can look at what's going on in California right now, and they have a real issue with subsidies for low-income folks. They have a real issue with availability of vehicles right now because of the supply chain issues. They have a real issue with rural charging stations and so on, so it's a real issue for the rural community. And I just feel bad that, in a sense, we're putting all our eggs in one basket when it comes to that. And to even further it, I have a real issue with parts of the Global Warming Solutions Act and the Climate Council when, as an LCAR member, that rule came through the agency, and we as legislators really don't have an opportunity to consider that and debate it and have folks come in and give testimony on it again. We've basically thrown our support through this Global Warming Solutions Act to agencies and the Climate Council, which is unelected. I find it hard to believe that I currently support Burlington in an effort for their McNeil plant, but through the Climate Council and their biomass subcommittee, they're looking at not allowing, or would like to see the McNeil plant not be allowed to convert their expended heat to a process that would go up to UVM and the medical center and others. And they are even looking at, have considered the possibility of closing McNeil and as well as Rygate. So again, these are issues that we as legislators need to discuss. And when, again, this comes through an unelected council, it concerns me that we don't get the opportunity again to do our due diligence and take testimony and make the hard decisions. So I hope that, I didn't hear the whole question, but again, that's some of my concerns around our initiatives going forward.
Yeah, I think that's really good to know. Do you see yourself creating some sort of bill or something that could address that? Like, I mean, I know as legislators, like, in a way, as you said, your hands are tied because you don't, it's an unelected council that's making decisions for our state, but it just seems so amazing to me because so many people I know that support the environment, you know, having all of us own electric cars is not the answer. Like, there's not enough raw materials in the planet to have everyone have an electric car. So I don't know why we're following California. We're not California. We shouldn't be following it. We should be taking care of Vermonters and doing what's best for us.
Well, to me, the reason that we're following and the real concern for me for the Climate Council and Global Warming Solutions Act is they look at it under benchmarks only, and they don't consider the overall cost and implications on Vermonters. They have guidelines to meet these benchmarks by certain dates, and if they don't meet them, there's a public lawsuit ability, which Conservation Law Foundation as others are poised and ready to, if we don't look like we're meeting those benchmarks. They aren't goals anymore, they're benchmarks. And that's the real concern for me, is they aren't looking at anything other than the reduction of carbon emissions. And we as legislators, I believe, have to look at more than that. So again, that's my concern there. And I know it's not going to go anywhere, but I have put in, there is the ability to revoke a rule that an agency has gone forward with. I have a bill in to do that. I know it's not going to happen. And I even went further to repeal the Global Warming Solutions Act, a bill, which I hope it at least starts a discussion. I know it wouldn't go anywhere in today's climate in the legislature, but again, I hope it starts a discussion.
Thanks. More thoughts? Yeah, I thought. How about we go with Avram first?
Please.
Yeah,
Okay.
go ahead.
I respectfully disagree with some of what Mark was saying. I've served on the committee that there are a number of House and Senate committees that dealt with all of these issues, but serving on the Energy and Technology Committee dealt with almost all of them to one degree or another. I, first of all, don't agree that the legislature does not have oversight, and that's all in the hands of bureaucrats and appointed officials. In fact, the Global Warming Solutions Act, which created the process for a very broad number of people representing all kinds of interests, one of their absolute primary proposals that came out of that was the clean heat standard. That went into my committee. We spent at least half of the last session working on that, and it went through the legislature and it went through the Senate. And then it got vetoed, and it's going to come around again in one form or another. So the idea that the legislature just tossed all of this to a bunch of unelected bureaucrats, that's how our government works. The legislature, the citizen legislature cannot we're not experts in everything, and we do need to delegate to state agencies and others to implement things based on the policies and parameters that the legislature sets. And then it comes back, and the legislature can always review, undo, change, alter. It happens all the time, not just around energy issues. In terms of electric vehicles, all I can say is I'm very aware, and I have raised this issue myself about the issues around battery storage, both in the vehicles themselves as well as other forms of storage. I'm also aware that new technologies are developing for storage on large-scale storage that do not require finite resources like lithium. Is that a few years away? It probably is, but those are things that are in the works. And in the meantime, we do need to take steps in these directions. That's my opinion, and I guess my experience with electric vehicles. 10 years ago, on the back roads where I live, no one in their right mind would have gotten an electric vehicle. Now a whole bunch of my neighbors do, and they're doing just fine coming up the hill in snow, mud season, whatever, because the technology did develop and mature.
Thanks, Avram. Jed, you had some comments on this?
Yeah. First of all, what is your name? Andrea. This is a big issue. It's a big issue in my town, climate and clean energy. I have been following the science since I was 18 years old when I started working in the woods. I'm a logger, been a logger for 56 years. Just like Dr. Fauci says, follow the science, or the governor, or Dr. Levine, we follow the science. The ecology of California, let's say there's 7 different forest types there, none of them have any relevance to the northern forest, northern hardwood forest type that dominates Vermont, Adirondacks, New Hampshire, and northern part of Maine. So the latitudes are different. There's nothing relevant. So while California is doing a great job with incredible industrial microchip tax base to carry out some of these initiatives, we're still a rural state with the second lowest population in the country. So when I was looking at these critical issues, I looked to how does our state function? What systems do we have that can do the most to remove carbon from the atmosphere? We're 80% or 79% forested, and proper management sequesters and stores carbon, creates a carbon sink, and brings other positive benefits: clean water, productive soils, recreation, forest products. These are all plastic and metal tables, but if they were wood, that's stored solar energy, that's stored carbon. So I think that we have other appropriate solutions that we can at least look at as part of the discussion, as opposed to model something off ecosystems that have no relevance to our region. But the second point you brought up, which is critical to me, clean heat standard, electric cars, they're great. The people who pay for these subsidies are the working people. The affluent, the rich that are bragging at the cocktail party, they got a subsidy for their electric vehicle. We paid for that. But we're generous. We've been doing this for a long time. And so I care what's fair. We would all, like you, or you want for your kids a electric vehicle. For my grandkids soon, I'd like them to have a electric skid or something like that, but it's different. This is looking in the future. It is not affordable for the average working person. And until these bills, whether it's clean heat standard or, the electric issue, come up with a solution, how can the people that are most vulnerable in our society and can afford these things the least, how are they going to be able to get them on an even that playing field? So that's where I come from, and I agree with Avram. If we can't fight for these critical issues and not pass the buck to some committee, we may get punched in the nose, but we can stand up and fight for what's fair for everyone. And I plan to speak up in a polite and respectful way.
Thanks, Jed. I think we're going to move on.
Can I just say one?
Oh,
I'm
okay,
sorry,
yeah, go ahead.
I just want to make one sort of sweeping comment about this conversation generally. I have only been in the legislature a short time, and what I would say is in this arena of climate change policy, I have heard more misinformation than any other arena that I have been a part of in the legislature. So whatever side you stand on here, whatever your concerns might be, financially or otherwise, what I would really implore everyone to do is please be curious. Please reach out and try to find out what is in the actual bill. And I will tell you, a lot of legislative members don't know themselves. There's so much that we're asked to do. There's so much that's in these policies. The people who are in those committees know it best, and so we'll try to steer you in that direction. But please, please, when we walk around our community and we say things about the clean heat standard that aren't true, it does a disservice to our community, and it does a disservice to our overarching goal of trying to balance the needs of our environment with the needs of our businesses, with the needs of our families and our communities. The reality is we have hard work to do here. The Clean Heat Standard was designed, ideally, to work with businesses, not individuals. But the message is it all gets trickled down to individuals. And on some level, that's true. But when all these terms and all these bills get conflated into one thing, it does a disservice to all of us. So please, 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 ask questions, reach out to us, try to find out what's in the actual bill. It's gonna help us too, and then we can come up with more actual, real policy approaches that are gonna try to balance the needs of everyone in this space. Thank you so much.
Thanks. I'm gonna change topic. We had one question right behind you and then I'll get to you next, okay?
On the clean heat, I think your point was really good. It's the communication and the conversation. We of course deal with it on the residential, the deliverable. We're the guy that delivers it. Be it biofuel, pellets, whatever it is, we're the ones doing it. So as you were looking at this clean heat bill, because there's some things in there that are a little concerning with the public utility, it seems like it's involved in everything. So what we would ask, I would ask anyways, is when you get into this bill, please have us come in, have me come in, whatever. I'm happy to, because we're the ones that are facing it. I mean, if you create this law, and I understand, but again, what we do to reduce traffic, there's no question we need to reduce that. But we still have to take care of the people. And we can't lose focus. The goal seems to get confusing sometimes. Our goal is to make it more and to make sure people are taken care of. So, hopefully we can help everybody come up with a plan and a process that will be the least smallest penalty on the consumer. Because ultimately the consumer is going to pay for it. Thank you.
Thanks, Peter. And to Peter's point, if any of the reps are ever looking for that source and you're not sure how to get to sources like Peter, groups like us are perfect for that. We will get you there and get those voices, make sure they're heard. So we had a question here.
Yes. So each time before I go into the voting process, I will look at the candidate and the bills that they're proposing and supporting, and go to the Vermont.gov website to look at those bills. And I've actually found them pretty confusing. And I don't consider myself an uneducated person. Can we get those bills in plain English and not legalese?
So
all in favor?
So you're saying on the website where you go to the legislators page, down below it are the bills that we've either put in or have co-signed onto?
Right.
I think if you have questions about any of those, just give me a call. I'm glad to answer any questions on any of the bills that I've proposed or have co-signed on. But yeah.
I voted for you.
Oh. I got my list right here.
Any other thoughts on that, Avram?
Yeah, I mean, the bills themselves can be hard to decipher because what they're doing is they're taking existing Vermont statute and saying, in this section, cross out this sentence and add these 3 words. And so if you're just reading that, it's a little hard. Usually, bills will have at least a general statement of purpose at the beginning. That doesn't always tell you everything, but that is, I mean, I am reviewing a couple of bills that I'm either sponsoring or co-sponsoring right now with the Legislative Council lawyer draftsperson, and it's hard for me to follow. It's like this is what I wanted to have happen. Show me where it says that in the bill, and it is there, but it's not always obvious. So I think the best thing to do is, if it's a subject that is of interest to you, is to reach out to the legislator that's sponsoring it, and say, what are you trying to do with this bill?
To everybody, but that's just me, because I you know, I do believe in an educated electorate. And I think that, you know, with the misinformation that we've seen going on countrywide, you know, we don't need that to happen in our little state.
But to add to this too, obviously you can contact the legislators who are drafting the bill or supporting the bill. Some of our advocacy groups, like your local RDC, which would be us, we do a lot of work on tracking these bills the whole way through the session. We actually hire people to help us with this and that sort of thing. That being said, these are going to be business-related bills for us. So if it's a business-related type bill that any of you all have questions on, feel free to reach out to us and we'll do our best to interpret them. And beyond that, we're often looking, to harken back to what Peter said, we're often looking for the horse's mouth, so to speak, on these bills, and people who are willing to go to Montpelier and talk to the people like the folks we have up here at the panel. And if you're willing to do that sort of thing and you feel strongly about any bill that's you're reading about in the paper, contact us, because we need those people. I can sit up in front of these folks and say what I think, and a lot of times they'll say, yeah, well, he's a business advocacy guy. Well, and they really want to hear from the businesses, right? I mean, you want to hear from the folks on the street. So just something to think about for the whole group. Get you next, this one.
Yep. I'm Andrew from Lamoille-Washington Co-op. Along these lines, the way I learned a lot about a bill is watching when it's first introduced into committee, because you get a nice little summary of what, you know, it's meant to be. And if you like to watch TV instead of reading the bill, you know, you can now go back and, you know, look at tapes, YouTubes, you know, and even do it in double time if you're in a hurry. So I'm kind of curious whether, now that you're post-COVID back in the building, those practices, which were really great because nobody wants to sit in committee rooms all day waiting, you know, in legislative time, but you can go back, either live stream or go back later and actually see the testimony. Is that going to be the practice going forward, to understand that there's still live stream committee work?
As far as I know, they're not changing it.
Right. It's still going to be live streamed. It's still going to be a YouTube, all our committee meetings and the floor.
That's great. So that's another way, if there's a bill you're interested in, you can, you know, go see the YouTube video and you know, hear really kind of honest conversation and comments and questions.
Can I add something to that? So yeah, just unfortunately the bill language is written, as they said, in legalese, because it's the law, so it has to be able to sort of like speak the language of the courts and whatnot. But what, you know, we receive when the bill comes into committee, the first thing they do is legislative counsel sits down and does what they call a walkthrough. And so the attorney sits down with us and takes us line by line through every one of those bills. So if you are curious, like she was saying, you can find the YouTube live stream, watch it 2 times the speed, and get exactly what we're hearing in terms of the actual breakdown of every line of that bill.
Great. We had a question here.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. My name is Ryan Durham, Superintendent for Lamoille South. Just want to thank you for your service, for the Vermonters that you serve. One of the big questions that's going to come up in the session will be around how to use the excess ed fund money. So there's about $63 million that's going to be surplus. And, you know, as we're putting together our budgets right now across the state, 2 of the big factors are the property yield and the CLAs. The property yield letter came out from the tax commissioner, which indicated that, you know, there's a surplus, which brings our tax rate down. Then last week, the CLAs came out, and as you probably know already, you know, most towns around the state are going to have to go through a reappraisal because the CLAs were so low, which really impacts tax bills in a negative way for many Vermonters. And so I'm wondering about your thoughts on using the surplus money in the ed fund to pay down, you know, the property tax bills for Vermonters when you get, you know, approached with so many different agenda items and things that come your way, and if you see that as a big priority. And I'm also wondering about the capital improvement needs in schools around the state. And as a state, we don't have any funding stream for school construction, and so it falls all on the local communities. And so I'm just wondering about those, you know, kind of those 2 pieces, just from your side.
Just that report that came out that said there was a surplus in the ed fund. If you go back and look previous years, of that report, which comes out in December, right? By the time you get into, that's a projection. It's never the same by the time. I think a couple of years ago, there was going to be a 10-cent increase on the statewide property tax, and then it ended up when we were done. It was like, I think it went down a penny or something like that. But so I'm not sure how much you can put into that report for all of a sudden being able to spend that money. I don't know if it's there or not. We won't know. And then in terms of the CLA and going back, I know that the Ways and Means Committee is looking at how to deal with that. And there's some legislation coming out. I have no, it was just, I heard about it a couple days ago. So I don't know what it looks like, but I know that is definitely a concern of the legislature for this upcoming session to be taken care of right away. They're gonna have to deal with it pretty early in the session because we gotta have it done just after town meeting.
Mark?
Yeah, you may remember too that I believe it was last year there was a $90 million surplus, and the governor, of course, wanted to create some sort of a payback. It didn't work out that way. We reduced the education property tax, but think about it now. If you do that, reduce it through the surplus, the budgets don't seem to be going down. So if you do that one year and everybody's budget goes up again, you're going to have an exacerbated problem, if you ask me. I'm not convinced of what the ideal solution is, other than we've talked about the number of student decline and the increase in budgets is a real concern. The CLAs in Vermont, I'm a lister, so I've been one for the past 28 years, and it's amazing to me that what has happened in the past couple of years as far as property values and what our grand list is, and you're right, we do have to reappraise. I don't know where it's all going to end, but it can't continue the way it is in regards to property values and still have local folks be able to afford and live in the state.
More thoughts from the group? Just as a quick follow-up, and I don't, a seed that's been planted among some of the business owners that we've spoken to, hearkening back to the early childhood education discussion, is the ed fund going to support some of this early childhood education? And I don't know that we need an answer to that. I guess we're just planting a seed that it seems like an appropriate space for some funding for this work. So go ahead, Jeff.
I could respond to what you just asked, but to Ryan Harity's point, there's one thing that just struck me, Ryan, and that is all through the campaign and all through the news, there are all these advocacy groups with $400 million projects, $200 million projects, with no clear decision on how these initiatives that are important to society are going to be funded. But you brought up something that's relevant to most towns in the entire state, and that is any infrastructure improvement with regard to schools are 100% funded by bonds that the local taxpayer foots the bill, whether it's the city of Burlington, Morristown, Stowe, Jeff, whatever. So with the massive wish list and needs for our state, the towns are also facing huge, very local fiscal challenges with capital borrowing. And it's all comes down to your tax bill at the end of the day. So we need to be cognizant of all these local responsibilities that the taxpayers got to bear, as well as these other, critical initiatives.
Mark, did you have more on that?
Yeah, just I think it's critical for the legislature to think beyond the initial money that's laid out there. I'll give you an example: the PCB testing. There was money out there for that, but like the school district in Cabot came up with some issues, and so where's the money going forward? Again, like you say, is it going to be all on the backs of Cabot residents? Same sort of thing with Burlington. I mean, you know, they've got that big school bond and now that they've voted on, and they're looking for 20-some million dollars of that PCB. My understanding is testing money that was somewhere around 30 million. It's, you know, there's going to be some battles here, and we as legislatures have to think beyond just whether it's the lead testing and where the money's going to come from to pay for improving that, PCB levels, you name it. And I certainly feel for community schools and what they have to do to meet our guidelines, our mandates, and we don't have the money or we don't know the wherewithal is where that's going to come from to solve the problem.
It's another question. Emily, we got you once, so I'm going to go over to the fella in the back here, and we'll circle back.
Good morning. Thank you for making this opportunity available to us. I'm Eric Dodge, the town administrator for the town of Morristown. I've just been jotting notes. Thank you for supplying the notepad as well. So I'm just going to run down a roster of things that are concerning the town of Morristown. And the taxpayers are building a budget right now that is out of sight. Act 250. I would encourage on the utilities issue and with the vehicles, whatnot, that you continue it if you haven't already. Bring them into the fold. Your small utility managers. Just talk about folks that have to do something with a little nothing, and they keep those lights on. The most recent storm, great example of how we were able to recover from that. With some good planning and whatnot. But as far as home charging of vehicles or charging stations in municipalities, you need to talk to those folks. It isn't just a post with a cord hanging from it that gets installed. It's underground. There are huge costs involved in the utilities, the underground portion of that. Money from municipalities. I don't run sewer and water anymore. That's the village most. But I need a new highway garage. I need a new police station. I have a town office I'm remodeling to fit peace and people in the little more areas. I got no place to move. I don't have parking. The bank owns the land around the building. We have the footprint of the building. No money was made available for municipal buildings during the whole ARPA piece. So I would encourage you to keep your ears open if somebody's interested in put some funding behind that. We're interested in receiving. Lofty goals for environmental change. We're an industrialized nation. It's taken us over 100 years to get to the environmental damage that we've done. We can't fix it in 20. Act 64, the Clean Water Act, has impacted the municipality because it became a very minuscule funded act. The town of Morristown gets $40,000 a year. Excuse me, not a year. We have $40,000 next year to pay for 8-inch minus crushed rock for the ditches. Yet by 2036, in a town with 75 miles of dirt road, I have to be in full compliance at 64. I don't have the numbers for Morrisville because I'm not going to spend taxpayer dollars to get an estimate. I'm not below the town of Stowe, please. They're my wonderful neighbor. They did spend it 4 years ago with a cost estimate of over $4 million to bring them to full compliance. That's at that day's dollar amount. Unfunded mandates from the state, down to municipalities, is just taking money out of taxpayer wallets. So please just bear that in mind as we're moving forward on environmental issues, that they may feel good, they charge forward on helping the environment, but if you're not realistic in your timelines, you're just negatively impacting the taxpayers. Thank you.
Thanks. Yeah, Dave.
Thanks, Pat. So I've heard a couple of times that we talked about business impact. I met a guy years ago that gave me some advice about raising money. He said, if you want to raise more money, ask more people. And so it feels like the biggest issue at hand is that our numerator continues to go up and our denominator continues to go down. So I'm curious, and again, I'm a math guy, I play one on TV, right? But that's going to lead to unhappy constituents. And I'm just curious about at what point or what initiatives are there about extending our denominator? How are we trying to bring in more business that deals with the minimum wage issue? Because if you can all of a sudden bring in for-profit businesses that are giving people livable wages and healthcare and all of these things that are sharing some of the tax burden so that it doesn't fall just on the percentage of property owners, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, right? So what initiatives or conversations are there about how do we try to recruit business to Vermont? Because I think, in my humble opinion, it feels like the last 10 years, there's been a concrete focus on trying to put more burden on the businesses, and at the same time, all it's doing is what can't be passed on to consumers is getting passed on to the taxpayers. And so it feels like it's, we're sort of in this death spiral to a point where we're going to lose more small businesses because they can't afford to be in operation, which is only going to impact the workforce issues greater. It's not going to help the housing situations if our property taxes continue to go. So again, I feel like there's a lot of interconnected issues here, but one big way I feel like we could solve this is to increase the denominator. So I guess if any of you have any thoughts about how we bring more business in.
Thanks.
Thanks,
Dave. That's a good question.
Yeah, I'd respond to that. Just that Governor Douglas, former Governor Douglas, Jim Douglas, Peter Shumlin, Phil Scott, every one of them, at least rhetorically and almost literally, stood on their head advocating to bring business, bigger employers, better employers to the state, romancing, workforce. We'll hand out cash when you get to the Brattleboro Visitor Center. Move here. We need workforce and we need business. So I disagree that the state has just been happy to pass it on to the business or the burden on the taxpayer. The state, topographically, climatically, cost of energy, it is a rather high cost state. Infrastructure network, highways, it's not we're in a competitive world. There are a lot of states on either side of us and below us romancing these businesses. So that's a challenge. It's one I'm sure we're all aware of. I haven't heard numerator and denominator since I was in grade school and dropped down and went to the workforce.
Yeah. Well, I think to Dave's point, and a lot of what we hear from the business community, and quite honestly, what comes out of the legislature is not often business-friendly stuff, let's just say. And a lot of the funding is not gone to business-friendly stuff. It honestly goes to a lot of service-related stuff. That's Vermont. And I don't know if that's what you were kind of referring to, Dave, but the business community recognizes this a lot in Lamoille County, I can tell you. And I know some of it is just the nature of our legislature, but I guess my hope is that our local delegation can at least recognize that. We can say last year, and I'm sure you all remember the governor's budget battle, he did put a lot of economic development funds in there that were stripped out through the process of the legislature and then restored at the end at a smaller amount. So while there is a lot of lip service, the legislature, in my opinion, and a lot of the business owners I speak to, is not a business-friendly body. So this is a general consensus. I hope I'm not speaking out of turn here with the business owners in the room, but it's not a mystery that this is a consensus that business owners have, at least in this county.
Can I jump in?
Yeah.
So I guess I have a couple thoughts, and I don't have a global answer to your question of how to bring in new business to Vermont necessarily, but I just want to give a perspective from inside the State House. When we were talking about ARPA money and all the money flowing in over the pandemic, what I will tell you, and this is like not in any way to invalidate the frustrations that business owners have with the legislature, but what I will tell you is that moving money to businesses through that ARPA process was far easier than moving money to low-income people. there is a comfort, there is an understanding in the State House of the role that business plays in our state. And it is hard, it is much harder to get money to poor people in that State House than it is to get money to businesses. So I just really want to be careful that I don't fully endorse this notion that that space is anti-business by any means. We have a small amount of money to solve a lot of hard problems. And getting that money out the door is tricky, but businesses have it far easier than many other constituencies that go into that State House. So I just want to say that. The other thing I want to say is I get nervous when we talk about business globally. There's a lot of different kinds of business. And I think Vermont really believes in and supports small business. And because of the nature and the identity of Vermont, we do best when our small businesses are flourishing. What I get concerned about is a lot of the policies that we create don't differentiate between large business and small business. And we're driving our small businesses out, and we're creating more opportunities for big business to come in that frankly doesn't care about local Vermonters in the same way that my local bakery does. But why are they being held in many ways to the same sort of standard? It's similar with tenant law. We have all these housing crises right now, but we're creating policy that in many ways treats small landlords the same way they do people coming in and buying all their housing. That's bonkers. That's bonkers. And if we end up with those folks owning all their housing and owning all our businesses, the State House isn't going to be your biggest issue, right? So we have got to figure out a way to differentiate our policy to really support small business, small landlords, small local Vermonters. And if we can figure out how to do that, we're going to be far better off. Figuring out how to do that is the question. And if you have ideas, I would love to hear them. And I would love to carry them into the State House. And this is what I have been trumpeting throughout. It's very hard to do, to get people to make that distinction and say no to bigger business and yes to smaller business.
Thanks, Kate. Those are good points. So we're pushing up on our time limit here. Does anyone on the panel have any strong feelings about something that we touched on today or that we didn't touch on today that you'd really like to get out there before the session starts? Avram.
This actually, I was going to say in relation to the discussion we were just having, but which is that when we talk about business, the nature of what is a business is changing, and the people who are coming to Vermont, the nature of that and where they work is changing, and that has a lot to do with an issue that I've spent a fair amount of time on, and that is true high-speed broadband, because there are people running businesses and working at businesses where the exact location matters less and less, and that's just happening. But the access to that is grossly unequal around the state, depending on where you live in, whether it's in the served or unserved or underserved parts of Lamoille County or anywhere else. And so I think that is for the going forward. Having true broadband, I'll say 100 upload, 100 download symmetrical on the back roads of our area here and around the rural parts of the state is a major, will make it possible for a lot of operation of businesses as well as employment.
Thanks, Avram. Dan.
Just a quick, investments in our technical and career centers, because we're here, are important to starting new businesses as well as our state colleges. So, I think those we've been making those investments, and I'll continue to advocate that we continue. So,
Mark.
Quickly on
Jeff, hi.
I just wanted to make a comment. In the fall of last year, the federal government gave $19 million to the state of Vermont. The state of Vermont gave that money to VITA to disseminate on something called the Forgivable Loan Program. I'm concerned that not enough people have heard about it. The program is, and I'm working with VITA to help disseminate this. any business can apply for it, for-profit, not-for-profit. There might be a size requirement, but most Vermont businesses meet the size requirement. And it's a forgivable loan program up to $350,000 that any business can apply for. It's based on the pandemic. If you're still recovering from the pandemic, then you may qualify. There's an eligibility report that has to be completed to find out if you're eligible. And forgivable loan program, which is an oxymoron to me, but what happens is they set it up as a loan, and if the money is spent correctly over 12 months, it's forgiven. So it becomes a grant. So this is and any money that is not disseminated, not allocated, goes back to the state budget. So there's a little bit of a mixed message there. But I would like to get this out to businesses. I want to work with businesses to help them become eligible. It's much better in their hands than in the state budget, in my opinion. And so, anyways, if anybody is interested in it, I can obviously get you information about it. But it's a nice little program, and it's easy. It's not easy to necessarily become eligible, but it's the requirements, spending requirements are simple.
Yeah, thanks, Jeff. And RDCs, we're happy to help get you in touch with Jeff or the necessary sources. There are some, what I would describe as overly strict requirements for it, but that's just my opinion. Mark, did you have a...
Yeah, just quickly on GovOps, I believe we'll probably be considering some changes to the marijuana laws. One was removing those caps again, or changing the caps on THC as well as home delivery. So any advocates out there that are concerned should certainly stay involved.
Thanks. So Lucy, I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit since you didn't speak yet today. Lucy's our new rep from Cambridge
and Waterville.
Cambridge, Waterville, and I don't know that this matters, but you're the youngest rep in there. Yeah. So I don't know. How are you feeling about it?
I'm really excited, and I think just like Jed, we're really excited. I'm really excited to be collaborating with everybody and really getting in there, talking about all of these issues. We can speak on the issues all day, but it's really the activity of once we're in there of the change that's actually going to happen. Putting our word to everything.
Yeah, and I think that's a good segue, actually, into our next breakfast, which will be February 6th in Stowe. At that point, we'll be about a month into the session, and things will start to take shape, and this discussion might look a little different next month as we hear what the governor wants to do and how the legislature is kind of leaning on that. So we'd encourage you all to join us next month. I appreciate you all coming as well. Some of these folks will be here next month. Probably some other folks will be here next month. I know one of our senators, Rich Russman, is planning on coming next month. So thanks everybody for coming. Time to Dine was the bakery, and Jenna's Promise Roasting was the coffee. So if you like it, check those businesses out. And there's more over there. Feel free to take some on the road with you when you head out. And thanks everybody for coming. Appreciate it. Thank you.